The aroma of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and my mother's infamous sweet potato casserole usually filled our house with a comforting warmth, a promise of togetherness. But that Thanksgiving, the familiar sense felt like a heavy shroud, suffocating me. I was Eleanor, 28 years old, and already feeling the weight of a life unlived, a constant undercurrent of inadequacy that had been subtly yet consistently reinforced by the very people I called family. Our Thanksgiving table was an antique, a grand mahogany beast that had seen generations of feasting and familial drama. It was always laden to the point of buckling, groaning under the weight of tradition and expectation. And this year, like every year, I felt like I was buckling right along with it. My father, Robert, a man whose booming laugh could fill a room and whose casual observations could empty it of all joy, sat at the head. My mother, Sarah, perpetually flustered yet somehow always put together, hovered nearby, ensuring every dish was perfect. My older brother, Michael, and his wife, Clara, along with their two boisterous children, occupied one side, their lives seemingly perfectly aligned with the suburban dream. My younger sister, Emily, always the pretty one, the thin one, the successful one, was on the other, her carefully curated life radiating an effortless glow that I could only envy. I was seated awkwardly at the corner, trying to make myself as small as possible, a skill I had perfected over years of family gatherings. Every year, it was the same. The subtle glances at my plate, the unsolicited advice about diet and exercise, the backhanded compliments that felt more like cuts. "Oh, Eleanor, you look comfortable. Are you sure you want another slice of pie, dear? It's so rich." I'd learned to deflect, to smile weakly, to retreat into myself, hoping to become invisible. This year, however, felt different. A new kind of tension hung in the air, a precursor to something sharper, more definitive. The conversation was light, superficial, punctuated by Michael's loud anecdotes and Emily's quiet, knowing smiles. I tried to contribute, to ask about my nephew's school play, but my voice seemed to get lost in the general din, like a pebble dropped into a roaring river. Then it happened. My father, reaching for the gravy boat, gestured expansively across the table. His eyes, usually twinkling with a kind of benevolent mischief, landed on me. He paused, his gaze lingering for a beat too long. The room, for me at least, seemed to fall silent. I braced myself, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. "You know," he began, his voice carrying easily over the clinking of cutlery, "we really need a bigger table. Eleanor here, she just takes up so much space." And then they laughed. Not a malicious, cruel laugh, not overtly. It was a soft, indulgent chuckle from my mother, a knowing snort from Michael, a polite titter from Clara, and a barely suppressed giggle from Emily. It was the kind of laughter that said, "Oh, Dad, you're so funny, so observant, always stating the obvious." It was the laughter of people who understood the joke, who were in on it, and who, by their amusement, confirmed my father's words as an undeniable truth. The world tilted. The vibrant colors of the festive spread blurred into an indistinguishable mess. The warmth of the room turned into a chilling draft. "Takes up space." The words echoed in my ears, not just about my physical presence at the table, but about my very existence in their lives. I was not just a person, a daughter, a sister, an aunt. I was a problem, an inconvenience, a burden. I was too much, too big, too visible in a way they didn't approve of. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a burning flush creep up my neck and face. My eyes prickled, but I refused to cry. Not here, not now, not in front of them. The humiliation was a physical ache, a searing pain in my chest. I looked at my mother, whose eyes met mine for a fleeting second before darting away, a flicker of something that might have been pity, or perhaps just discomfort. I looked at my siblings, still chuckling, oblivious to the chasm that had just opened beneath me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. A quiet, desperate resolve hardened into a cold, fierce determination. I had spent my entire life trying to fit into their mold, to shrink myself, to earn their approval, to be loved. And all it had earned me was a punchline. I was done. Utterly, irrevocably done. Without a word, I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood against the polished floor felt deafening in the sudden silence that fell over the table. All eyes were on me now, confusion replacing their amusement. My father, still holding the gravy boat, looked mildly surprised. My mother's face registered alarm. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with a false sweetness that only amplified my anger. I stood, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice, when it came, was steady, though quiet. "Nothing's wrong, Mom. I just realized something." I looked directly at my father, my gaze unwavering. "You're right, Dad. I do take up space, and I'm going to go find a place where that's not a problem." I turned, walked past their bewildered faces, through the dining room, and out the front door. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't say goodbye. The cold November air hit me like a shock, but it felt cleaner, sharper, more real than the suffocating warmth of the house I had just left. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. The scent of turkey and their laughter fading into the rearview mirror. I drove for hours, aimlessly at first, then with a growing sense of purpose. I called my best friend, Chloe, who lived 1,000 miles away, in a city I'd only visited once. Her voice, when she answered, was a lifeline. I poured out the story, the words tumbling out in a rush of pain and indignation. Chloe, bless her heart, didn't try to minimize my feelings or offer platitudes. She listened, her occasional, "Oh, Eleanor," or "That's just awful," sounding like the balm I desperately needed. "Come here," she said, her voice firm. "You can crash on my couch for as long as you need. Get out of there. You deserve better." And just like that, a seed of an idea, born of pain, began to sprout. Chloe lived in Seattle, a city on the other side of the country, a world away from the small, stifling town I had always known. 3,000 miles. It sounded like an impossible distance, a grand, dramatic gesture. But in that moment, it felt like the only path to salvation. The next few days were a blur of furious packing, tearful goodbyes to the few friends who truly understood, and a detached, almost robotic efficiency. I called my parents once, briefly, to tell them I was leaving town for good. My mother cried. My father mumbled something about me being overly sensitive. My siblings were conspicuously absent from the conversation. It solidified my decision. There was no going back. The drive across the country was a pilgrimage. Each mile was a shedding of old skin, a leaving behind of expectations and disappointments. I listened to podcasts, sang along to terrible pop songs, and sometimes just drove in silence. The vast American landscape unfolding before me, mirroring the vastness of the unknown future I was heading towards. There were moments of doubt, of course, moments where the loneliness was a sharp pang, where the fear of the unknown threatened to overwhelm me. But each time, I remembered my father's words, the echo of their laughter, and a renewed surge of defiant energy propelled me forward. When I finally arrived in Seattle, Chloe was waiting for me with open arms and a hot meal. Her apartment, small but cozy, became my sanctuary. The city itself was a revelation, vibrant, bustling, alive with a different kind of energy. It rained constantly, but even the persistent drizzle felt cleansing, washing away the dust of my past. The first few months were hard, really hard. I was starting from scratch, financially strapped and emotionally raw. I took a job as a barista, the early mornings a brutal shock to my system. I missed my old life, even the parts that had hurt me. Loneliness was a constant companion, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my determined optimism. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, convinced I had made a terrible mistake, that I was destined to be an outcast no matter how far I ran. But Chloe was a rock. She listened, she encouraged, she never let me wallow for too long. "You're here now, Eleanor," she'd say, handing me a mug of tea. "This is your fresh start. You get to decide who you are now." Her words resonated. I started small. I joined a hiking club, forcing myself out of my comfort zone and into the breathtaking natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. I enrolled in an evening class at a community college, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage for: graphic design. I started cooking for myself, not just to eat, but to experiment, to create. I found joy in the simple act of nurturing myself, of making choices that served me, not the expectations of others. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. The physical activity of hiking, the mental stimulation of my classes, and the sheer act of building a new routine started to change me. I shed some weight, not through crash diets or desperate attempts to conform, but as a natural byproduct of a healthier lifestyle and a healthier mindset. More importantly, I shed the mental baggage. The constant self-criticism, the feeling of being inherently flawed, began to recede. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of my past, who saw me for who I was becoming, not who I used to be. They celebrated my small victories, commiserated with my frustrations, and built a new kind of family around me, a chosen family. We shared meals, not at a grand mahogany table laden with unspoken judgments, but at my small IKEA dining table, filled with laughter, genuine connection, and food we had all contributed to. This was my new table, built with intention, love, and a fierce sense of belonging. Years passed. I graduated from community college, landed a junior designer position at a small but innovative tech company, and eventually, through hard work and determination, worked my way up to a senior role. I bought my own small condo, a space I meticulously designed to be my sanctuary. I traveled, explored, and embraced life with an enthusiasm I never knew I possessed. The painful memory of that Thanksgiving still lingered, a scar, but it no longer defined me. It was a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. Then the call came. It was my mother, her voice thin and reedy, laced with an unfamiliar hesitancy. "Eleanor, it's Mom." My heart hammered in my chest. I hadn't spoken to them in over 5 years, beyond the occasional terse email. "Hello, Mom," I replied, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil I felt. She launched into an explanation. My grandmother, her mother, was turning 90. A big celebration was planned. Everyone would be there. "We'd really love for you to come, Eleanor. It's been so long. Grandma misses you terribly." The invitation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken expectations. My first instinct was to refuse, to protect myself. But then, a different thought emerged, a quiet, confident voice within me. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. I had nothing to prove, nothing to fear. I was not the same Eleanor who had fled that Thanksgiving table. "I'll consider it, Mom," I said, and hung up. I debated for days, talking it over with Chloe and my new friends. They offered support, but ultimately the decision was mine. I decided to go, not for them, but for closure, for my grandmother, who had always been kind, if somewhat passive, and perhaps a tiny part of me, for the quiet satisfaction of showing them the Eleanor I had become. The flight back felt surreal. The familiar landscape of my hometown, once a source of comfort, now felt alien, smaller. I booked a hotel instead of staying with my parents, a clear boundary established before I even arrived. The party was held at a local country club, an elegant affair. As I walked in, dressed in a tailored, confident navy dress that flattered my now stronger physique, I felt a familiar tension in the pit of my stomach. But this time, it was mixed with a powerful sense of self-possession. I scanned the room, and then I saw them. My mother, looking older, more tired. My father, still boisterous, but with a hint of something softened around the edges. Michael, looking heavier, his laugh still loud, but now laced with a touch of weariness. Emily, still beautiful, but with a subtle hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Their eyes found me. First my mother's, a gasp escaping her lips. Then my father's, his face registering a mixture of shock and something akin to awe. Michael and Emily's reactions were similar, wide eyes, mouths slightly agape. They didn't recognize me, not at first, not the woman who stood before them, radiating quiet strength and self-assurance. I walked towards them, a gentle smile on my face. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady. My mother rushed forward, embracing me tightly. "Eleanor, oh my darling, you're wonderful. Look at you." Her words tumbled out, a mix of genuine affection and thinly veiled surprise at my transformation. My father stepped forward, his booming voice surprisingly subdued. "Eleanor, my goodness, you've changed." He looked me up and down, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Regret? Admiration? I couldn't tell. "Yes, Dad," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I have." The awkward pleasantries continued. Michael gave me a quick, almost hesitant hug, his eyes still assessing. Emily, ever the most competitive, offered a tight smile. "You look great, Eleanor. What's your secret?" "The secret," I said, my smile widening, "is building a life that truly nourishes you, and knowing when to walk away from one that doesn't." My gaze swept over all of them. Later, during dinner, I found myself seated, ironically, at a large, round table. My grandmother, frail but with a twinkle in her eye, held my hand. My family, now subdued, watched me. They asked about Seattle, about my job, about my life. I spoke openly, confidently, sharing stories of my travels, my work, my friends, my chosen family. I spoke of the vibrant life I had built, the challenges I had overcome, the person I had become. I didn't gloat, I didn't accuse, I simply presented my truth, a truth that was undeniable. Their reactions were telling. My mother looked wistful, perhaps seeing the daughter she could have had, a deeper connection with. My father seemed reflective, unusually quiet. Michael and Emily, for the first time, seemed genuinely interested, perhaps even a little envious of the freedom and fulfillment I exuded. As the night drew to a close, my father approached me, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Eleanor," he began, his voice softer than I had ever heard it, "about that Thanksgiving, years ago, I was out of line. I'm sorry, truly." The apology, so long overdue, so unexpected, hung in the air. For a moment, I felt a surge of old pain, old anger, but it quickly dissipated, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. His words no longer held the power to wound me. I was beyond that. I looked at him, truly looked at him, not as the man who had hurt me, but as a flawed, aging individual. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "It took me a long time, and a lot of miles, to understand that your words said more about you than they did about me. I've built a new life, a new table, where I'm valued and where I belong." He nodded slowly, a profound sadness in his eyes. I'm proud of you." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling genuinely earned. "But my pride isn't something you get to claim anymore. It's mine." I spent a few more days in my hometown, connecting with my grandmother, having a coffee with Chloe's sister who still lived there. But I didn't stay with my family. I maintained my boundaries. I had forgiven, not for them, but for myself. I had found peace, and I understood with absolute clarity that my revenge wasn't about making them suffer, but about showing them what they had lost by trying to diminish me. When I boarded the plane back to Seattle, I looked out the window as the familiar landscape receded. There was no bitterness, no anger, only a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had propelled me, for the courage I had found, and for the beautiful, fulfilling life I had built, 3,000 miles away, at my very own table. A table where I didn't just take up space, but where I filled it, unapologetically, with my presence, my joy, and my truth. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.